Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am in a different setup. I'm here in Maia, Portugal, doing a chess tournament called Maia Chess Open or Maia Chess Festival. We have just finished the first round. It started at 7 p.m. yesterday and my game lasted about 2.5 hours. Some games went on after midnight, so it was a crazy first round. Today's round starts in 3 hours, so I wanted to do a little recap video for you so you can check out what happened in my first game, and I'll try to do a video for each of my games so you hopefully have many videos to look forward to. Also, if you'd like to follow my games live, you can find them on Lichess. I'll put a link in the description, so yep. Okay, let's just jump into it. So, I want to tell you a little bit about how I prepared for this game. I did not prepare. I did not look at my opponent's openings. I knew I was white, so I just thought I will play my regular repertoire. However, my regular repertoire is, of course, e4, and then usually my opponents respond with e5. I play knight f3, and they play knight c6. It's a pretty standard opening. I can show you right now. This is what it looks like. This is what we played. And usually I play d4 with the intention of sacrificing that pawn and then pushing c3. And then if they take that one as well, I can just show you actually. So this is what I normally play. It's called the Goring Gambit, and it sacrifices a couple of pawns, but in return, I get really nicely developed bishops. I'm showing you this to let you know that this is how I usually play, especially online and in my past tournaments. However, I'm sorry if you can hear any background noise. However, I decided not to play this in classical anymore because I think that it's a pretty flimsy opening for a classical game. Because while I do get tremendous advantage in development, and there are some really tricky opening positions that I can put my opponent in, I have this fear that if we do get into an endgame, I will just be 2 pawns down in an endgame, and pawns gain value. The less pieces there are on the board, the more value the pawns will have. So I'm not sure if I want to play gambits and sacrifices straight out of the opening anymore. So this is the reason why I decided to just play the Scotch opening and not gambit any pawns. So my opponent takes, I take with the intention of trading knights, and then I thought I would have a pretty solid looking opening. My opponent played this move, which actually surprised me. I think that this move, knight c3, doesn't work because after I get pinned, it's a little complicated for me to try to retrieve my pawn, and it just seemed a little much. I also missed this move, which is threatening a fork. So they have to address it, and in the meantime, I can just, rotate my knight back and defend this pawn, and we're solid. I missed all of that, so I just took. My thinking was that if queen takes, which queen did take with a check, I will simply play queen d2, which is pinning their queen as well, so they kind of have to trade me. And after I retake with bishop, they will have to double their pawns, which could be a vulnerability for them. I think at this point already my position is slightly worse. I am down a pawn, but I thought I would make up for it because I'm ahead in development. So my next move, I was thinking about developing my bishops or even castling, but I think what I made was a mistake, or the worst move possible, really. Well, I guess I could have blundered a piece. That would have been worse, but I made the move knight c3. I completely missed that this pawn is now a weakness that can really easily be attacked, which my opponent did not miss. They played the move bishop f5, and after thinking for a while, I think the only way to defend is force a bishop trade, because even though it creates an isolated pawn, at least it allows me to have a center pawn, which will prove difficult to defend. But I thought there was some value to having a center pawn while my opponent has none. That was just what I was thinking. So my opponent castled, and now, of course, the rook is attacking my d3 pawn, and I have to address it. And after thinking for a while, the only way for me to address it was really knight e2. I think it's the only move that's my opinion. If I don't want to be down yet another pawn, I believe this is the only good move. Not being able to castle is quite a positional sacrifice to make, but with the queens off the board and my opponent's pieces behind in development, I thought it was safe to move my king. I will try to develop my pieces as soon as possible, and I can even manually castle in the future. My opponent made the move f5, which is a mistake in my opinion. At best, a dubious move. I hadn't checked with the engine at the point that I was analyzing this, so this is my mark that it's a dubious move. But after I checked with the engine, it was not indeed a good move at all, which is funny because in the post-game analysis, my opponent said, I don't think I made any mistakes in this game. And I was like, yeah, you played really well, but I don't think that pushing the f5 pawn while you're behind in development was a great idea. And he said, no, I thought it was a good move. And you know I love to prove myself right. So when I saw with the engine, after I analyzed the game manually, it was not a great move indeed. It is a good move in the sense that it does take some control over the very important e4 square, which will prove useful to black. I think I should have probably immediately challenged this idea by pushing h3, but I didn't want to get stuck in this position with my king in the center. The king is defending a pawn, and you don't really want your king to defend, so I thought the best option would be to keep developing. So these were the next few moves. Rook e1, knight f6, of course, to be expected, and I played the move bishop g5. I was developing my bishop with a tempo. This move is annoying for black because if they don't address it, I will take their very strong knight and I will also make them double another set of pawns, which should make it easier for me to regain a pawn. With two sets of double pawns, there gotta be some pawns dropping, you know? They defended, and then I made another best move in the position, which is king f1, manually castling. My king is now safe, and even though my d3 pawn is technically hanging, so is this bishop, you know? So they should probably take care of the bishop before they do anything about the pawn. So they did indeed play the move rook h e8. Now, I played the move rook a d1, which I later found that it was an inaccuracy, but I thought that I should just defend my hanging pawn in this position. Of course, they attacked my bishop, and it was hard to think of which square the bishop would be happy on, because on h4, I will show you, the bishop will get trapped. So that was not an option, of course, and any of these moves like bishop f4 or bishop e3, I think the bishop would have become a target for black, in which time they would improve their position. So I didn't want to do a whole chase of my bishop. So what I did was bishop c1. I marked this as a great move, and indeed it was the best move in the position. So I'm happy I found it. But however, I will tell you exactly right now, the engine analysis says that it's minus 2.2 for black. So it's black's advantage, big advantage at this point. It's not completely won by black yet, but it's not looking good for white for sure. So they made the move bishop c5, and I had to think for 12 minutes about how to address this move. Black is threatening rook takes e1, rook takes e1, and then rook takes d3. For some reason, I don't know why I didn't think of king takes e1 in case of that, so that my rook would stay defending the pawn. I was maybe completely out of focus at this point. I'm not sure what happened. In this position, my strongest candidate move was rook takes e8. So my opponent has to address this capture, and this gives me time to improve my position, maybe push the d4 pawn if they take back with the rook, or if they take with the knight. I think this is a bit of a passive move, which also allows me to adjust my position, improve my pieces. But I didn't give myself the grace and the time to do that. I got scared. This move, bishop e3, probably was the move that messed up my position the most. It allows the very forcing knight g4. I think h3 would have been much better here, and taking back my rook with the king if they took on e1. But unfortunately, I didn't do that, as it goes. My opponent actually took, and I thought having two pawns on the e file and d file could prove useful as far as center control goes, maybe even making a passer at some point. But it all falls after knight g4, which I think is such an excellent move. He prepared it. My opponent prepared this move for a long time, and it certainly came. I never got the chance or the time to play that h3 to stop the knight from coming in, and now the knight is threatening everything. The h2 pawn is under attack. The even more crushing knight takes e3 is staring at me, which would obviously fork my king and rook, and that's just lost on the spot. And in this position, the only move I could make was e4. I don't think there was anything else that could have happened. So I think the e4 push was definitely my only move in this position. I will check with the engine quickly just to make sure. Yes, e4 is the best move, even though it's not a winning move, but it is the best move for sure. e4, and actually they leave that h2 pawn hanging because they know I don't have time to address it, and they play pawn takes e4, f takes e4. This is where I should have just taken back the pawn and tried to get back some control over my position. Maybe trade rooks, try to retrieve some pawns. Instead, I chose to play a move that saves one of my pawns while the rest of my house is on fire. So I played h3. Too little, too late. I knew this check was possible, but I wasn't sure if it was useful for black. They definitely restrict my king, but they don't really have any mate threats. So I move my king to g1, knight f2, the only move is rook d2, and then knight takes d3. I thought for a really long time about what to do here. My strongest candidate move was rook takes e4, and I think in the postgame analysis, it was the only move I could have made. And I don't know what happened in my head, but you guys, I played the move knight takes e4 and walked away from the board. I really needed to go to the bathroom, completely forgetting that my rook is hanging. And no, this isn't a fancy Levy-Rosman rook sacrifice. This is just a blunder. After I came back to the board and I saw this position, I was in shock. I actually thought my opponent tampered with the position because there's no way I hung a rook, right? Yes, there's way. They didn't tamper with the position. I checked my notation. Yeah, I mean, even it's on video as well. I was streaming it. So no, I blundered a rook, and of course I resigned here because there is not even any tactics or tricks that I could make that would give me back any advantage. In this position, the evaluation says that it's minus 6.4. That means that black is completely winning, and it only is a matter of time before they convert to a win. I could have drawn it out and traded a lot of pieces to try to just drag the game on and see if I could do anything, but I think in this moment you know that you're defeated, so you could drag it on for longer, but I feel like that's just torturing yourself and the opponent. Give yourself time to rest at that point, you know? If I thought there was anything that I could have done to have even a chance of a draw or a stalemate or anything, I would have definitely kept on playing because I'm not quick to resign. I would rather get checkmated than resign if the game requires it. But I think in this position, after blundering a rook, you take the L. That's how the game went. I'm not too upset about the loss, but I am pretty upset about how I played. I don't think the quality of my chess was very good. So that's why I'm gonna now stop recording and go prepare for my next game instead of thinking about other things or doing other things. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow with my round 2 recap. Bye!